Chapter 3, Getting Closer, Part 1. Is there anything more challenging than being a lady for the flower fairy? Sheng, which one looks better, this one or that one? Inside the clothing store, the flower fairy compared two dresses, asking her advisor, Mosheng, who had been called in early in the morning for advice. Well, this one, Mosheng replied. I'm wearing that one today. The flower fairy's face darkened halfway. Sheng, are you not fully awake? You seem absent-minded and distracted since early morning. Mosheng chuckled nervously, quickly changing the topic. Xiao Hong, the key to being a lady is not just about the clothes. What is it then? It's about manners and behavior, Mosheng explained. For example, if someone asks you about your favorite music, you definitely shouldn't say heavy metal rock. I don't listen to rock, the flower fairy said happily. I love Xiaoqi and Anyo's Wave by Wave. This time, it was Mosheng's turn to look somewhat troubled. He had images of three men wearing floral underpants, holding guitars, and chasing bikini-clad ladies on the beach, while the flower fairy excitedly commented, especially the part beauty turns into an old lady, it directly expresses my expectations for the future. When you two are together, don't discuss music, Mosheng said firmly. How about talking about movies? You're planning to watch a movie tonight, right? It also showcases a lady's taste and temperament. Movies? The flower fairy's eyes lit up. I love A Chinese Odyssey. Luo Jiaing in it looks so handsome, and his dialogue is so philosophical, especially the line, humans are born of their mothers, while demons are born of demonesses, which encompasses ethics, love, medicine, and religion. It's the best representation of equality among all living beings. Xiao Hong, Mosheng said with difficulty, I think it's better if you don't talk tonight. Finally, after a lot of effort, the flower fairy released Mosheng, and it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Mosheng went home, took a nap, and when he came out of the darkroom, the sky was already dark. Looking at the clock on the wall, it was already 7:30. He was starving, but when he opened the fridge, there was nothing to eat. Mosheng grabbed his wallet and keys, ready to go to the supermarket. As he walked downstairs and crossed the flower garden, Mosheng's steps suddenly halted, and he raised his gaze. Across the dim streetlight, he stood there, his eyes locking onto her through the swirling smoke. Yi Chen. He stood at a distance, not rushing to approach. He was dressed casually today, with a simple shirt and pants, yet he exuded an extraordinary charm. She used to gaze at him in infatuation and ask, Yi Chen, why do you look good in everything? His response was always an annoyed and disdainful glare. The past. It was all about the past again. Zhao Mosheng, you need to get yourself together. Stop thinking about the past. Yi Chen stubbed out his cigarette and walked over to her, who was frozen in place. Can you accompany me for a walk? Sure. Silence hung between them as they walked a long way, and Yi Chen still hadn't spoken. Mosheng couldn't help asking, where are we going? We're here. The bus stop. Were they going to take the bus? Do you have any change? Yes. Mosheng dug out a few coins from her wallet and held them in her hand. Give me one. Yi Chen took one coin from her open hand, accidentally brushing his fingertip across her palm. Mosheng was taken aback and quickly withdrew her hand, but he seemed to be oblivious, turning sideways as he gazed in the direction of the approaching bus. Let's get on. She didn't have time to ask anything and followed him onto the bus. The Saturday night bus was naturally crowded, filled with young students and some older professors taking a stroll. Between the two of them were 2 or 3 other passengers, making it difficult to breathe and move. After the bus stopped at 8 or 9 stations, Yichen suddenly reached out, pulled her off the bus, and then let go immediately, walking ahead alone. Mosheng looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings and the tall buildings. Where is this place? Yichen halted his steps and turned back, his deep gaze fixed on her. You don't recognize it. Should she recognize it? A city was so big, and she hadn't been everywhere. But why did he seem so displeased, as if she had committed some grave sin? Looking at her obvious confusion, Chen's eyes darkened gradually. Forget it. He uttered these 2 words coldly, then quickly turned around and walked away with fast strides. Mosheng didn't understand until they arrived at the entrance of a nostalgic-looking university. This place, C University. So, this street she had just walked through, staring in shock at the bustling crowd, was actually Laobeiji Street. The street she and Yichen had walked through countless times. How could it be? What night market? The vendors shouting their goods. Where were all those cheap and delicious snacks along the streets? You visit after returning to the country. Yichen calmed his emotions, speaking calmly. No. It wasn't that she didn't want to come, but I've been too busy with work, she mumbled, finding her own reason somewhat laughable. Yichen her and said calmly, you don't have to say anything, I understand. What? She didn't understand. They entered C University, and the century-old campus hadn't changed much. Being here made Mosheng feel as if she was walking in her old dreams. Those big trees, those seemingly old dormitory buildings, those students laughing as they passed by. A sense of melancholy and bitterness filled her heart, and she realized more than ever that she had indeed been away for so many years. Hey! Mosheng pointed to a small grocery store on the roadside that turned the corner. This shop is still here. I wonder if the old couple is still running it. No, Yichen said. They had someone else running it even before I graduated. Oh, Mosheng lightly responded, smiling as she said, I'll buy something to eat. I'm starving. The small shop now had a young female shopkeeper taking care of it while looking after her child. She greeted them while handling her tasks. Mosheng bought some bread and cola, and Yichen also grabbed a can of beer, which he paid for. Mosheng recalled the times when they used to argue over who would pay. She was too young back then and didn't understand a man's pride and dignity. It must have been tiring for Yichen to be with her. When did you start drinking? It was just a casual question, but she couldn't help thinking of last night's passionate kiss, laced with the scent of alcohol. She felt a bit uneasy and turned her head away. Just a few years ago, he said quietly after a moment of silence. Yes, just a few years ago. Well, let's find a place to sit, Mosheng suggested. The place was still crowded with people exercising even though it was past 8. Many young students were running, and there were also some older professors taking walks nearby. They sat down by the side of the playground. Mosheng smiled and said, this playground holds my most painful memories. Yichen smiled faintly, a rare sight, and asked, 800 meters. Yes, Mosheng admitted somewhat embarrassingly, my best time for 800 meters was 4 minutes and 10 seconds. I remember you didn't believe it and said. She suddenly stopped, and Yichen's deep gaze locked onto her. What did I say? You said, Xiao Mosheng, how did I manage to catch up with you when you were running so slowly? Hey, isn't that Professor Zhou from our department? Mosheng pointed to the old man walking not far away. Yichen turned his gaze and nodded, standing up. I'll go over for a moment. Mosheng watched as he walked over, and the old professor seemed very pleased to see him, patting Yichen on the shoulder as they exchanged a few words. This old professor's hair was becoming sparser and sparser. Speaking of which, she got to know this distinguished professor from the law school entirely because of Yichen. At that time, Yichen was busy with his academic and tutoring responsibilities, and she couldn't easily find him as his girlfriend. To spend more time with him, whenever she had no classes, she would attend classes in his department. She listened to Professor Zhou's criminal law course from beginning to end for an entire semester. However, even now, she still couldn't quite grasp the most basic concept of presumption of innocence in criminal law. Unlike Yichen, whom she forcibly dragged to attend several advanced mathematics classes and who ended up helping her revise for exams. No one knew what Yichen said to Professor Zhou, but unexpectedly, the professor looked her way, smiling and nodding at her before walking away. When Mosheng curiously asked, "What did you say to him?" I told him I came back with a friend." Yichen glanced at her strangely. "Professor Zhou remembered you." Mosheng stammered, "He probably remembers me." She had made a fool of herself in this professor's class before. Professor Zhou never took attendance during lectures, and when he called on students to answer questions, he would simply point at someone randomly. Once, Mosheng was unlucky enough to be called on. She still remembered the question he asked: "What do you think the judgments should be for A, B, C, and D?" She was completely puzzled. Who were A, B, C, and D? What about E, F, G, and H? She discreetly pulled on Yichen's clothes under the table, but unexpectedly, he coldly responded, "I didn't listen." Oh, right, they had just had a fight not long ago, and Yichen was still mad at her. But to ignore her like this was a bit petty. So, in a moment of desperation, she blurted out, "Put all of them in prison." The entire classroom fell silent for a second before erupting in laughter. One male student shouted, "Professor, she's not from our department." Oh. Professor Zhou said with amusement, "Classmate, are you interested in my criminal law course?" Another round of laughter filled the room, with others chiming in, "Professor, she's here with her boyfriend." The old man had a very open mind. He enthusiastically inquired, "Who is her boyfriend?" He sounded as if he were doing lost and found services. Yichen stood up helplessly, feeling completely embarrassed. "Mine." Naturally, Professor Zhou knew Yichen. The humorous old man looked at him earnestly and said, "Student He, studying well on your own is not enough. Family education is also essential. It's embarrassing for a talented student from the law school like you to have a girlfriend who's legally blind. We'll lose face if we go outside." Mosheng still remembered the burst of laughter in the classroom. Yichen chuckled lightly. Indeed, it left a deep impression. Stared at him blankly. Was he laughing? Was he finally not cold-faced, treating her like a stranger? She turned her face suddenly, concealing her emotions and avoiding looking at him. She spoke somewhat unnaturally. "It's because you refused to help when someone was in need." She was still holding a grudge over this matter. Yichen's emotions were a mix of feelings, and he found it somewhat amusing. He really hadn't listened. She thought he could stay calm and focused on the lecture while giving her the cold shoulder. If he were calm and rational enough, he wouldn't be standing here now, wouldn't be with her. Yichen let out a sigh. "It's late. I'll walk you back." Still taking the bus, when they arrived downstairs, Mosheng stopped and said, "I'm here." He stopped too. Well, goodbye. Goodbye. Mosheng took 2 steps and turned back. He was still standing under the streetlight. What about you? His eyes gazed beyond her, hesitating to speak before saying after a while, yesterday, I'm sorry. It's all right. Mosheng said somewhat uncomfortably, you were drunk yesterday. Is that so? Yichen paused and his voice carried a hint of sarcasm. Suddenly, he lowered his head, and his cold lips touched hers briefly before he pulled away. His deep and complicated gaze locked onto her, and he said softly, Mosheng, I'm perfectly sober. Always. Perfectly sober as he watched himself sink.